Republican leader is recognized.
Over the weekend, Iran held what its supreme leader might call a presidential election. To the rest of the world, including millions of Iranians, what actually happened was quite clear. The regime's favored choice was selected from a limited field of approved candidates in a carefully controlled bit of political theater. There's no doubt this charade works as intended. The Ayatollah got a president-elect with a record of strict adherence to his regime's revolutionary orthodoxy. Meanwhile, former presidential candidates who emerged as leaders in the popular 2009 Green Movement remain under house arrest. Like his predecessor, Ibrahim Raisi will serve as a figurehead while the supreme leader and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard actually run the show. But even rigged elections have consequences. And the new, most visible figure in Tehran has a proven history as a hardline theocrat. For decades, from his time on a so-called death committee in the 1980s, the president-elect played an intimate role in the trial, conviction, and summary execution of political prisoners and peaceful protesters. There's no question he's an extreme hardliner, even in the Iranian context. And now he's set to be the so-called counterpart to President Biden as this administration re-engages eagerly with the world's most active state sponsor of terrorism. In some circles, a looming turnover in the top ranks of Iranian leadership is being spun as a reason for the White House to rush even faster than it already is toward restoring the Obama administration's failed nuclear deal. One particularly eager assessment in the New York Times called the next 6 weeks, quote, a unique window for clinching an agreement, like some sort of liquidation sale in which President Biden needs to take whatever he can. Meanwhile, rational observers know that the fundamental reality of the U.S.-Iranian relations certainly has not changed. In the selection of a new hardline figurehead in Tehran sends any signal, it's a reminder that showering the regime with sanctions relief and expecting a change in behavior is a reckless and damaging approach. In fact, President-elect Raisi has already said as much himself. Iran's ballistic missile program is, quote, not negotiable, and meeting with President Biden is not on the table. Of course, Iranian politicians and diplomats are known to lie and to dissemble, so we should pay closest attention to this regime's actions. What will they actually do? Here's the truth. Domestic political developments in Tehran don't absolve the Biden administration of its responsibility to confront Iran's nuclear and missile proliferation, its support for terrorism, its abuse of human rights, and its relentless efforts to destabilize the entire region. If President Biden hopes to earn bipartisan support for an Iran policy that could outlast his time in office, he needs to start explaining how he intends to respond as Iran ramps up threats against the United States and our closest partners in its backyard. So remember, Mr. President, the thousands of rockets Hamas fired at Israel last month were made possible by Iran. So were the precision-guiding munitions in Hezbollah's arsenal, and the ballistic missiles and UAVs launched into Saudi Arabia by the Houthis in Yemen, and the dozens of militia attacks on U.S. interests in Iraq carried out by Tehran's reliable acolytes. The Biden administration has had months to develop a coherent rationale for its eager engagement with the Iranian regime, months to hash out a better plan than rewarding terrorist sponsors with sanctions relief. An explanation to Congress is long overdue. Now, on an entirely different matter, later today, the Senate will vote on whether to advance Democrats' transparently partisan plan to tilt every election in America permanently in their favor. By now, the rotten inner workings of this power grab have been thoroughly exposed to the light. We know that it would shatter a decades-old understanding that campaign finance law should have a bipartisan referee and turn the Federal Election Commission into a partisan majority cudgel for Democrats to wield against their political opponents. We know that it would let Washington bureaucrats direct federal dollars into politicians' campaign accounts, government money for yard signs and attack ads. We know that it would let Democrats take a red pen to election laws in each of the 50 states, neutering popular precautions like voter ID while legalizing shady practices like ballot harvesting across the board. It's a recipe for undermining confidence in our elections, for remaking our entire system of government to suit the preferences of one far end of the political spectrum. And if they could, many Democrats would pass it with the slimmest possible majority, even after its companion faced bipartisan opposition over in the House. What a craven political calculation. What a way to show your disdain for the American people's choices. Of course, it isn't even limited to election law. Among the most dangerous parts of S1 is the way it would equip partisan regulators to intimidate and to discourage private citizens from engaging in political speech. Unfortunately, this one is a familiar concept for too many Americans. It's not hard to imagine federal bureaucrats indulging ideological grudges and chilling free speech. It's actually happened before. The nation was reminded just a few weeks ago how unable the federal government can be to protect private citizens' personal information. Unable or just unwilling. But conservatives in particular didn't need a reminder of what became institutionalized discrimination under the last Democratic administration. So when private contributors, nonprofit advocacy groups, and religious organizations see that S1's disclosure requirements would intentionally unlearn the lessons of the IRS abuses under Lois Lerner, they have plenty of reasons, plenty, to fear. Naming and shaming is not a hypothetical concept. It's been a concrete reality for thousands of private citizens. And today, Democrats are asking for a green light to supercharge the intimidation machine that makes all that possible. We've heard this entire package described in many ways over the years. It's been around for a while. These same rotten proposals have sometimes been called a massive overhaul for a broken democracy, sometimes just a modest package of tweaks for a democracy that's working perfectly, and sometimes a response to state actions, which this bill actually predates by many years. But whichever label Democrats slap on the bill, the substance remains the same. It's always been a plan to rewrite the ground rules of American politics. And by the way, no matter what far-left activists are telling our colleagues, this most sensitive subject would not be the best place to trash the Senate's rules to ram something through. In fact, these issues would be the worst possible place to push through a power grab at any cost. The Senate is no obstacle to voting laws done the right way. I've helped write legislation regarding our democracy that has soared through this chamber on huge bipartisan margins. The Senate is only an obstacle when the policy is flawed and the process is rotten. And that's exactly why this body exists. Today, the Senate's going to fulfill our founding purpose, stop the partisan power grab, and reject S1.